Welcome to episode 128 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode at the show notes, which is www.7, so the word all spelled out, seven health.com/128.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another episode of Real Health Radio. So a couple of weeks ago, I released an episode where I was chatting with Rachel, a past client of mine. And I have to say, this podcast was really well received and I got lots of great feedback from it. And so many people could resonate with her story and were inspired by the changes that she'd made, but also her ability to articulate these shifts in her behavior and thinking. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I really implore you to do so and go back and check it out. Today, I have another episode where I'm chatting with a past client. And this time around, it is Alex, and she's a client I've just finished working with. And Alex is someone who was a career dieter. As she mentions in our chat, her dieting history stretched over 15 or 20 years, and thoughts about food and her body were a constant and really inflicted damage in all areas of her life. So creating physical symptoms like insomnia and poor digestion, psychological symptoms like panic attacks and anxiety, and just more general life symptoms. So impinging on her ability to be present in social situations and to be able to eat in social situations or being able to play with her 2-year-old son. And over the space of 5 months, all of that has changed. And I'm going to let Alex tell you her story about this. And part of the reason I'm releasing this podcast now is because I'm currently taking on clients again. And a large percentage of the clients I work with are similar to Alex. They're on and off diets for decades often, with little success and with increasing problems. So if you hear yourself in Alex's words or experiences, then I'd love to have a chat and see if we could change this. As you'll hear, Alex's life is now completely different compared to where it was when we started together. So if you are interested in working together or simply finding out more about it, you can head over to www.7-health.com/help, so HELP. And there you can read more about how I work with clients, and you can also then apply for a free initial chat. So with that intro out of the way, let's get on with today's show. Here is my conversation with my past client, Alex. Hey Alex, thanks for joining me on the call today.
Hi.
I guess to start with, why don't you explain a little about your background and why you first got in contact with me?
Yeah, sure. So I've had a sort of a long-term history of dieting, probably the last 15 to 20 years, sort of various diets, restricted eating, which has been on and off over the last say 15 to 20 years, but just in the last couple of years it got particularly bad. I was on like very low calorie diets, which was followed by periods of binge eating. It then started to affect my both physical and mental health. So my periods stopped. I had insomnia constantly, and sort of mentally I getting more and more anxiety, and then started having panic attacks as well. So I just got to the point I felt like I needed to, take some action to stop the cycle, essentially.
And with dealing with it, I mean, was there hesitancy in contacting me? How long had you been thinking about doing something about this?
So I suppose I was always looking for what I could do next to try and help. So I was always looking at how I could break the cycle and get out of it and have a healthy relationship with food. I come across your book. I can't quite remember where I'd seen it, but I'd actually read your book and really liked what you talked about and really resonated with me, what was actually in there. But then I think it was still a while later, and then I came across you again. So I'd always said all along, I felt like with problems with food, you need to look at both the sort of the biological, the eating side of things, but also the psychological, and you needed to look at those two together. And I hadn't seen that anywhere else until sort of I came across your work, and that's when I saw it and I thought this is actually something that could work well, where you can address both sides of things together.
And had you worked with other practitioners before me? And if so, what were they working on and how that worked out for you?
Yeah, so I'd worked with a variety of practitioners. So I'd seen a dietitian who, for me, it was very much about you just need to eat this at this meal and at these times, which didn't particularly work well for me, coming from a sort of a restriction background. I felt it was too restricted and just ended up back in my old ways of eating and, restricting, then binging again. I'd also worked with a nutritionist, but again, that was very much about cut this food out, cut that food out, eat at these certain times. And I think just from the background I had, it didn't work particularly well for me. So that's, and I actually had seen a counsellor around eating disorders as well. But again, that was very much about looking into my past, and I felt like it needed the two to come together really and work as one, which I hadn't had.
And so do you want to describe a little bit of the process of us working together and what that experience looked like and felt like?
Yeah, definitely. So we spoke every other week, and I felt that was a good space of time. As I described it, it was enough time for me to convince myself I was doing it wrong to then speak to you again. So a lot of it was around actually looking at, what I was eating, tuning into sort of how I was feeling. But then actually it was about talking to you when thoughts came up about maybe I'm eating too much of X, maybe I'm eating when I'm not hungry. And actually it was us having those discussions, and you were able to sort of bring out of me where those thoughts came from, where I'd got in my mind that this was right and this is how it should be. And actually from that we were able to sort of come up with a better way of seeing things, I suppose. I found it quite hard at first, particularly around keeping a food diary. My first thought was like, I don't want to tell anybody what I'm eating, how much I'm eating. Like, he's going to be shocked and disgusted at it. But actually, it was, I felt we were able to work really well together. You were very reassuring. And actually, through that, we were able to sort of have a good dialogue, have those questions. And I guess probably my other concern at first was, it was going to be straight into the don't eat this, only eat at this time. And actually there was no restriction at all through us working together through what I ate. And that really helped because I was able to just, find my own way through it without getting into the cycles I'd gone into previously.
And you use the term we there a lot. Like with the working together, did it feel like it was collaborative? Did it feel like we were working together, or was me telling you what to do? How did you feel about all of that?
Yeah, it definitely felt collaborative. On a day-to-day basis, I knew that if I had a question, I wasn't sure about something, I could contact you. For all we spoke every other week, you were able to answer my emails in between those and messages. So yeah, it definitely felt like a collaborative effort. And I suppose in the beginning I needed quite a bit of hand holding because I wasn't sure. I didn't know I was doing it right. I was worried, like everything, or maybe I can't possibly be doing this right. And it really helped to have that person go along. And actually probably towards the end of us working together, I think I probably contacted you less in between sessions because I felt like, oh yes, I've got this. I know what I'm doing now. So
awesome. And so then, what are the improvements that you've noticed working together? And we'll go through different aspects of that. But in terms of your health, how have different symptoms or how has your health improved since working together?
So I guess the big one for me has been my sleep. How much improved my sleep has been. I was just looking back the other day on my food diary from when I started, and I think about a week in I'd written in my food diary, today I'm going to give myself permission to eat every time I feel hungry. And then, not surprisingly, that night I slept through for the first time in that year. I was totally stunned, but as you say, when we spoke, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And actually my sleep has just continued to improve to the point now where I only tend to wake up in the night if something external wakes me up. And whereas before, to sleep through the night was just, it maybe literally happened once or twice a year, and that was a surprising event, whereas now that is the expected. So that to me, I suppose, has been a real benefit and something I didn't even know was possible for me. So that's fantastic. My periods had returned. So as I say, previously I'd had a gap where I had no period for a year and a half, and then it came back for a couple of cycles and disappeared again. And since working with you, they've been sort of, I guess, regular for me, perhaps the best way of putting it. So that's been fantastic. From an energy perspective, I've had a lot more energy. I've wanted to go out and go on walks. I've wanted to exercise. I've wanted to spend time with my family rather than it feeling like an effort to do so. And also, I think mentally, health-wise, mentally, I've definitely felt calmer. I haven't had any further panic attacks. My anxiety has been a lot lower. So in that respect, and that's been as equally important to me as more the physical side of things as well. So fantastic results.
And so then I know body image was a big part of why you came to see me. So where are you with this stuff now?
Okay, so I think that was probably one of the hardest things I found at first. So a couple of years ago, when I lost a lot of weight, what I found was people at my work who I'd never spoken to before, so I work in a big office, people I didn't speak to were coming up to me and saying, oh, wow, you look amazing, congratulations, tell me the secret to your success, that side of things, which to me, that was quite confusing because although I'd lost weight, I felt really unwell, really weak, mentally I was quite anxious. But then I knew I needed to put on some weight to start feeling better again. But then my thoughts were like, what are people going to think of me? And that's what I found hard to begin with, was around other people's opinions about how they would perceive my weight gain. Would it be like, oh, so-and-so's a failure, she can't even stick to a diet, whatever it is. Whereas actually when we spoke, I realised sort of personally I didn't have an issue with the way I looked at a bigger size or a smaller size. I was quite comfortable. To me, it was more about how I felt within myself. And so actually having those discussions was really helpful because I was able to, as I put on the weight, reminding myself of how I felt. And actually now I feel like my mind's probably caught up with my body, and I feel, far more comfortable with how I am now than I have done even at, say, my lowest weight, where I was still quite obsessed with what I was looking like. So I'm definitely at, say, a calmer place around body image.
And then in terms of the food side of things, so I know you've chatted a little bit about the food log but how has that changed over the time we worked together?
So I think the biggest thing to me is that the mental chatter around food has gone. So whereas before it would be constant daily, what am I eating today? What am I allowed to eat? What am I not eating at the moment? Any kind of wanting, if I was due to go out for a meal with family or colleagues, there would be, right, I need to check the menu, see what I can eat. Just so much chatter in my daily life. It didn't leave a lot of space for other things. And now that's gone. I can wake up in the morning and get up, and the first thing I think about breakfast is actually when I walk into the kitchen and think, what am I going to eat now? It's just totally different. And to a point I didn't think was possible, having spent, say, all of my adult life thinking about food, always having some kind of diet or restriction in place. So this is the first time I've never had that. So as a result, I found I don't binge on things like I used to because there is no restriction. And when there's no restriction, there's no reason to then feel like actually, I've eaten something I shouldn't, so I might as well, eat as much of it as possible now because I know tomorrow I won't be able to again. Yeah. So that's been fantastic. And I've also found when perhaps some of the old thought patterns arise of like, oh, I need to get rid of this food because I'll eat too much. I'm able to actually talk through it, and through the work we've done together, I've got better thought patterns. So when the old thoughts come up, I can replace it with the newer thought patterns, and it's, instead of the shouting voice, it's more like just a bit of a whisper now, which is far more easily manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the actual eating side? So you talk there about the thinking about around the eating. So does it feel like you're eating better or healthier than you were before, or you're eating in a way that's supporting your body? How do you think about the actual food?
So I feel like I'm probably eating a balanced diet for the first time ever. I think I always, I guess the whole thing around diets, isn't it, is restriction in some way. So it's today, we're having a high fat, low carbohydrate diet, or it's a low fat diet, and whereas now I'm having a bit of everything every day. If I'm particularly hungry one day, I feel like I can eat more. I don't need to be thinking, oh, I've hit my quota for today. I'll just have to wait for tomorrow, or go over and above and think, oh, I've blown it, but I'll start back on something else. So it's a lot more relaxed, my way of eating. I feel like I can eat what I want, but also I feel able to make considered choices around, oh, I could eat this, but I probably wouldn't feel great after, so I'll pick something else instead. So I'm able to, make those considered choices at the same time.
Yeah. Which is really what intuitive eating is about. It's not just listening to what your palate likes, but it's also taking other variables into consideration and being able to do that without it feeling restrictive.
Yeah, definitely.
And so what about your life overall? Like, how was that shifted? What are some of the things maybe you're able to do now that just weren't achievable before?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just that's such a broad area as well. And having a think about this, I guess, because the focus is so much less on food now, there's just more time for everything else. So, but at the same time, it's particularly around the thinking. So, for example, my social life is much improved because I'm not worrying about, oh, what if people want to go out for drinks and I'm worried about the calories in a drink, or I can't be having it because I'm on this particular diet at the moment. So I'm able to go out for lunches with work colleagues or out for a meal with friends of an evening. One major thing for me is I started taking dance classes. So before this, I hadn't been confident enough in my body. I thought it was something I wouldn't be able to do. Whereas actually through doing this process, it's just helped me realize that there's more to life than worrying about what you look like and what other people think you look like. And actually it's about what makes you feel good. And dancing was always something I wanted to do. So I signed up, and I'm, taking weekly lessons, which is fantastic. And again, expanding my social circle, meeting people I wouldn't have got to meet otherwise. Another big thing is that I get to play with my son now. So I've got a 2-year-old son, and I think back to when I was eating hardly anything. He'd be at the park and I'd be sitting on a bench, feeling sort of cold and weak, not wanting to join in, probably looking at what next meal plan I could go on, or what I was going to eat or not eat for my dinner. Whereas now I'm, straight getting involved at the park, going down the slides as well. It's just lovely to be more involved with him, which has been massive. And then I know something we were talking about is most recently I've just been on holiday with my family for the last 2 weeks, and there were 15 of us in a shared house. There was food everywhere. People were cooking meals. Like, I had less control than ever about the environment in which I was in around the food. And actually, unbelievably for me, it just wasn't an issue. If I wanted to eat something, I could. If other people were eating, I could either join in or not. And actually it became like food became the thing where we could sit around and socialise, and it was fantastic, and the anxiety wasn't there, and it has just meant that I can spend, more time with family and friends and enjoy my life so much more.
And you mentioned a couple of things that I'd like to touch on in terms of the dance. So yeah, how has your relationship with exercise or the way you think about exercise or movement changed?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think I probably used to use exercise as not quite a punishment, but it became like, oh, I've eaten more today, so I need to run more or to go out for a long walk. It was always a consequence, whereas now it's far more about what do I feel like doing. So if I wake up and I think, oh great, I want to go out for a walk, I will do. If I wake up and think I'd rather just stay in today, the weather's a bit miserable, I'm not feeling great, I don't punish myself for not going out. It's just simply around what do I fancy doing, and something like dancing is something which I just I've wanted to do for such a long time, and it's such a joy to be able to sort of go out and move my body and not be concerned about what I look like or how much of it I have to do. It's just about going out there and enjoying myself.
And then the other part was just talking about eating in social situations, whether that be with family or with work. Were you the kind of person who would, I don't know, check menus before going out or be really anxious about, oh God, I don't know if I can do this meal with people? Yeah, what was your experience like before?
Yeah, absolutely. It would be to the point sometimes where if there was a work lunch planned, I'd be thinking, oh, maybe I'll call in sick today because I can't afford to eat those many calories, or there's nothing on the menu I can eat. I'd always check the menu beforehand. And the worst one for me is where they'd give you a menu and they'd list the calories next to the meal, because at that point I just became lost I couldn't pick anything because I knew the calories in it. It was all wrong, and anything. I struggled to pick what I wanted to eat. I think that's the best way of putting it. It wasn't about what I wanted, what I fancied in the moment. It was just about what would have the least impact on me from a weight perspective. But also I became quite convinced at one point that all these different foods were sort of affecting me digestively, which wasn't the case. That was probably far more around the fact I wasn't eating enough, and that was the issue. So yeah, I really struggled with that, and as a result, never got to enjoy a meal. There was too much anxiety in the run up, and then actually the eating of it, I suppose.
And you touched on digestion there. How has that changed over the time working together?
That has been a lot better. I think part of my digestive problems were around sort of having too long a gap between meals, perhaps. But now there's just, I'd say I just had a lot of gas and bloating before, which I don't have to the same level now. Or if there is a particular food I eat and I react to it in that way, I know I can comfortably not eat that food, and it isn't an issue, and I don't feel like I'm desperate to eat it because I've had to restrict it, because I've chosen not to eat it from a health perspective rather than from this concern about, I've been restricting so long, I just need to eat X, Y, and Z all the time now.
Okay. And what about, in society, it's hard to escape from dieting chat and people talking about weight, and how does those kind of conversations affect you now versus what was going on before?
So I think what's handy now is, as you say, they happen all the time, particularly at work or in social situations. And I found the best thing for me now is just to recognise them. And although I recognise them, it doesn't affect me in the same way. So whereas before, if I don't know, perhaps if someone had eaten a chocolate bar and then started saying, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, I'm going to have to go back on a diet tomorrow, my mind would immediately have thought of like, oh yes, I shouldn't be doing that either. Like, what can I do to atone for this? Whereas now I can hear it, and if I'm eating the same thing, it's like, well, that's okay. This is what I've chosen to eat. I don't need to vastly change what I'm doing as a result of eating this one chocolate bar. That's fine.
So look, the last thing I want to ask is, like, part of the reason I'm doing this is I'm taking on new clients at the moment. what would you say to someone who is struggling with what you were dealing with? So a career of dieting, going from one diet to next, like what advice would you have for them? And I'm not asking you to say like, yes, you have to work with Chris, but yeah, just generally, is there anything you would suggest in terms of next steps?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that the support is out there, and find somebody to work with, whoever that is, because I tried going it alone for a long time, using internet searches, and there's just so much information out there on the web. It often conflicting. It can drive you a bit crazy because one person's telling you to do this, another person's telling you to do this, and it's like everybody's got the answer, but all the answers are different. And for me, the best thing I've found is actually to work with somebody. Find somebody who you can trust and you can open up to, and you can tell them how you feel, and you feel comfortable with what they're coming back to you with as well. Because I've worked with people in the past who I've felt quite close with, and you don't get to have that dialogue. You don't get to sort of resolve things. And for all, I suppose for all we've working together around the food side of things, like it does get quite personal, sort of going into past history, that side of things, and you want to feel comfortable with the person you're working with. So I'd say, find someone to work with, try it out, and if it doesn't work, look somewhere else. Don't get disheartened and think, right, working with a nutritionist doesn't work for me. I've tried it once, it didn't work. Is get that support, but find that person who works for you.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on and for chatting about this stuff. I know I'm asking you to talk about very personal things, so I'm really appreciative of you being so open and sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you for having me and asking me to as well. Appreciate it.
So I hope you got something out of that conversation with Alex. I hope it demonstrated the many areas that I work on with clients, and also what's possible to achieve if you want to make changes. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm now taking on clients again. If you're interested in working together or finding out more, you can head over to www.7-health.com/help. And there you can read about how I work with clients, and you can apply for the free initial chat so we can see if we're a good fit for one another. So that is it for this week's show. I'll be back next week with a solo episode that I'm very excited about. Enjoy your week, and I will catch you then.